Hi, this is Jonathan. Welcome to the tutorial. If you have a 2-computer setup or more, only the first part of this video will pertain to you, because once you get MIDI data to Transmidifier, Transmidifier will send MIDI data to your other computers via MIDI over LAN. So what this video is going to focus on is how to get MIDI data from Transmidifier back into Logic so you can use Logic as your sample playback device and still receive all the great benefits that Transmidifier offers. But in order to do that, we have to use the environment in Logic, and think of that as being able to get under the hood of your car and make modifications to the engine. So I've broken it down into 5 steps. The first one being to create the IAC driver ports. The second being in Logic to create external MIDI tracks so you can send data to Transmidifier. Then we have to go into the environment and create splitters to connect to your instruments. Then we have to connect the ports that we created in the IAC driver to the splitters, and then go to Transmidifier and assign your correct outputs and channels to the instruments you want. So let's get started. First thing you have to do is go to the Audio MIDI Setup, which is in your Utilities folder in your Applications folder. You need to set up the IAC ports. Double click on it. If you don't see the MIDI window, go open the top menu there that says Window and say Show MIDI. As you can see, I've already set up 4 ports. Each port has 16 channels, which is more than enough. These are the ports that send MIDI data to Transmidifier. For this demo, I've set up some additional ones, which would be the ports that send MIDI data back to Logic. So you want to create at least 4 ports to send MIDI data to Transmidifier, and then each section of orchestra or instrument group, you want to create a port for them as well. I'm showing you some demos here, some examples of how you might want to organize it, but it's entirely up to you. Maybe instead of flute piccolo, you want to have just winds. And the reason I put the word Logic in front of it is so you can tell what port that is within Logic. It'll be important later. Also important is that this demo works great with Logic 8, 9, and 10, although Logic 10 does have some bugs that I discovered. So I don't use it professionally yet. So going into Logic, when you set up your output ports to Logic, I recommend doing them in groups. So in this demo here, I've got these set up as percussion. Timpani, snares, piano. It's not really part of the setup, but just a different sound for this demo. All of these groups that I'm showing you could just say timpani instead of percussion. And maybe there are just a bunch of different timpani instruments and rolls and effects and crescendos and decrescendos or whatever it might be. So it's very important to keep things organized and in groups. These other ones are multis, which I will show you later. So the first thing we need to do is create external MIDI tracks that send MIDI from Logic to Transmidifier. And we've already created the ports inside of the IAC driver. So now we just need to go into the environment in Logic. There's a couple of different ways to create external MIDI tracks. And if you do it with a plus sign and then add as many as you want, you have to go through each one and set the port and channel, and it takes too long, and there's a much better way to do it. And that is by opening up the environment, which is Command 8, or you go up into the window. It says Show MIDI Environment. I already have the environment windows open here, but I just want to show you. But an environment has layers, and these are the ones that come with Logic. Whenever you open up a new project, it's going to have these. You can create layers if you want to organize. But we're going to go to the MIDI instruments layer. I'm just going to close this window since I already have another environment layer set up here. I've already set up these 2. So I'm going to show you how to create another one. Is when you go to the menu, New, and set up multi-instrument. And then you want to enable all these tracks by clicking on each one, and activates the track. Gets rid of that little diagonal line within the square. And you can name this. Let's call it brass. Keep in mind that each one of these multis is a port, and each one has 16 channels. So for strings, 1 would be first violins, 2 would be second violins, 3 would be violas, 4 would be violas 2, maybe. Cello 1, cello 2. It depends on how you want to organize it. Later in the video, I'll show you how I have my template. If you want to change the icon for all of the tracks at once, click on the top part of this bar, which selects all of them and allows you to change the icon for all of them. And this is one of the bugs that I found in Logic. This is supposed to let you to do that. It will let you do it in Logic 9. I've searched the forums, and other people are having the same bug issue. So now we need to select the port for this multi. So this is the brass multi we just created, and we're going to select the Transmidifier brass port. This is the port that sends data to Transmidifier, not to be confused with another port that says Logic instead. It didn't let me do it because this is a bug in Logic 10, but in Logic 9 it works fine. And the channel should be set to all because it is a multi. But instead of creating a multi, you could just create several new instruments, as I'm doing here, which I ended up doing in my own template, which I will show you later. But you can create several single instruments and then assign the channel and port for each individual instrument there. But it's a lot easier and for this demo to just create a multi. And if you want an individual icon within the individual tracks on a multi, then just click on the channel you want and then select the icon. And then click on a different channel and select the icon. And make sure you don't have one channel selected when you go to drag it to the arrange window. Otherwise, only one channel will be dragged and dropped and created. As you can see, only one yellow is highlighted. So make sure you click the top title bar, which selects all of them, and then you can drag it to the arrange window. And when you do, make sure you don't drag it on top of other tracks. Drag it underneath the lowest track and it'll highlight all 16 above, but you're not going to be replacing them. It'll actually create new ones. So just let go right underneath that little blank area and it'll create all new tracks for you. It's very easy that way. Some of these have been named already, as you can see, and that's because I did that prior, and it remembers when you create the new tracks. So you just want to go through and name the ones, because these are the MIDI tracks that you're going to be recording on. So whatever you name them is what your region will be named. So it's important to be accurate and clear about what the name of the track is, because it's also what sends MIDI data to Transmidifier. And then you just want to repeat this process with all of your multis, or if you made individual tracks, all of your individual instrument tracks. And again, make sure you don't put them on top of the ones you just created, but below them, so it creates new tracks. As you can see, by going into the environment, you've created very quickly a bunch of MIDI tracks that have the correct ports and the correct channels already assigned to them, and all you have to do is name them. So as you can see, if you click on percussion 1, it's going to send MIDI data to the percussion input on Transmidifier, as you can see, but I don't have the output set, so we don't hear any sound. If we go to violins 1, you'll see same thing, because it's the strings port, channel 1, the strings input on Transmidifier activates. I don't need to do a tutorial to set up Transmidifier because Brian has a great one already, but as you can see, I've already got my output port set to the correct port which is my Logic first violins. Remember, we set this up in the IAC driver prior. And now we need to go into Logic, into the environment, into the clicks and ports layer. So you open up environment layer, click on clicks and ports. I've already got one set up, so I'm going to use that window instead. There's a couple things to look out for in the clicks and ports window. Make sure that sum is not connected to your main keyboard here. If you do, it's going to create a MIDI feedback loop in Logic and Transmidifier, and it's not going to work. It's going to freak it out. Here are the ports that I created in the IAC driver. These send MIDI to Transmidifier. Port 1 is my main keyboard. This is where you want to connect to your keyboard here, the icon there inside the clicks and ports. Port 2 is my MIDI controller that handles all my key switching for Transmidifier. If you have a USB-based keyboard, it's going to show up, the name of the keyboard will show up there in that list, and that's what you want to connect to the input notes keyboard icon there. And here you see my output ports from Transmidifier into Logic. That's why they're called Logic. You can see Logic word there in front of what group they are. So this port will connect to our instrument. As you can see, it's our first violins. Got a couple examples in here for you. So how do we do that? The first thing we need to do is create these channel splitters. So we just go up and click on New, and you'll see Channel Splitter. And you want to rename it to match what it is splitting, to what port it is supposed to be. So if it's violins 1, just name it violins 1. As you can see, it's very important to name them, keep things organized, because otherwise when you have to connect it, it's just going to show up as channel splitter. It won't make any sense. And then basically what you do is you start from channel 1, grab the cable, and just start connecting it to the instrument. Now this is what we have to do for multi-timbral instruments like Contact or Play or Spectrasonics or any of the others. Speaking of multi-timbral instruments, what you don't want to do in Logic is to go to the Add icon to add an instrument and have multi-timbral selected. You're going to think, oh, I want to have all 16 channels in Contact available to me. But no, you don't want to do that, because it's going to create basically 15 more channel strips that are all identical to the first one, and they're all going to be identical, which they should be because it's a multi-timbral instrument. It would look like all of these highlighted, and they would all say Contact with the same output, with the same everything, and they're all controlled by the same volume, etc., etc. But all they are is simply representations of each channel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and on and on. But what you want to do is make sure to not select multi-timbral. Just have it be a regular instrument, and then go up here and you can see the port and channel is selected to all. And that's going to give you the multi-timbral capacity with just one channel strip. It just saves space, and it's just cleaner and easier to deal with. So Contact, you know, all the other instruments, multi-timbral like East, West, or Contact, or Spectrasonic stuff. Make sure you keep multi-timbral off. Very important. And another little bug that I found in Logic, you can select outputs to multiple outputs, so each channel has a different output within Contact or Play or whatever, which is very cool. But I found a little bug in Logic 10 where if you add those instruments, it doesn't allow you to change how many channels you have to that instrument. It won't let you change to all. It'll connect it to channel 1 and won't let you change it. So it's a little bug they're working out. But in Logic 9, it works fine. So what we need to do next is get the output of Transmidifier. That port and channel has to get into here. And how are we going to get it into that splitter? Well, that's why we go to the Clicks and Ports window, and you'll see Logic First Violins 1. We need to cable it from there to this splitter here. I've done it that way by jumping windows like that, but it doesn't always work well. But there is a better way that definitely works every single time. Is you hold down Option and click on the little node, and the layers of the environment will come up. And you want to go to the mixer layer, because that's the one we're in, and you'll see the First Violins split, and connect it to that. So now that port is connected to that splitter. The essence of it is pretty easy, but figuring it out can be daunting. But that's what this video is for, to make it easy for you. So here's my percussion. Here's the one I created. So the percussion. You're going to hold down Option, click, go to Mixer, and select the percussion. And then you would do the same thing for the cello and all the other ports connected to all the other splitters that are organized by group in 16 channel groups. Or if you have the MultiTibral instruments there like Contact, which you would just only need one channel strip, one fader. So now when we come down, let me move this window for you so you can kind of see what's going on. When we come to the First Violins MIDI channel, you can see, hold on, I got to make the window a little smaller. So you can see in Transmidifier that First Violins is being activated, and we can have audio happening. And if I use my key switching, you can see it'll switch back and forth to 1 and value 13, which is my CC14 controller value. As I click on second violins, you won't see anything because I have no output selected, but that's simply how it works. But we could go down to the cello. The cello is activated. You can see that it will come out of the contact output there called cello. There we go. Then of course we've got all the percussion ones also. So I'm going to activate these 3 instruments with my key switching. I'll show you here. I've got them set up in Transmidifier already. Here's our timpani, here's our snare, and the piano. So essentially that's it. You would just do that for your massive template. I just showed you on small scale how to do it, but it's fairly easy once you understand how to do it. Now I'm going to show you my template in Logic, so it might give you an idea of how to manage things. But these are the MIDI tracks that send data to Transmidifier, my external MIDI tracks. This is how I have them organized. In most cases, I have, like horns 1 and 2, trumpets 1 and 2, trombones 1 and 2, and it just, for key switching reasons, it's nice to have an additional track to use simultaneously. But these are all the MIDI tracks that I use to send to Transmidifier. Logic 10 has several bugs. I don't recommend it for professional use right now, but Logic 9 is working great. So here is my MIDI instruments page. Remember before I had you guys create some multis that were the MIDI outputs to Transmidifier. But what I did instead was create just a new instrument. Did solo instruments, 1 channel only, and then I could highlight all those and then drag them to the arrange window, and then that created my tracks. But in this case, I I did it this way is just so that I could insert something in between the output. You can see it's set to no port, and there's no port there. The port is selected by that little node. That tells it what port in the IAC driver that it's connected to. But if I need to, I can set a transformer in between before it gets to the port if I need to use some of Logic's cool MIDI features. But as you can see, I don't really have to do that. Transmidifier has some great MIDI features already. But one thing I did do is in these sort of string ensemble patches, if I'm sort of writing or kind of creating some things that way, let's say I have a great first violin section, I can just copy and paste that into the actual first violin's track, and it's the exact same sound that I've been hearing, because I have my my ensemble patch is the first violins and second violins and violas that I use on a regular track, if that makes any sense. So instead of using some random ensemble patch, I'm actually just created my own ensemble patch before it gets to Transmidifier. And here's my Transmidifier setup. A lot of channels. You can see I've got 1 and 2 for a lot of different things. Here's the output section of the strings or violins, and cinematic strings and cine strings, and Hollywood strings, Symphobia. A lot of them are muted. Just got cine strings, so trying to figure out a new combination to get a great sound. Here's LA scoring strings. So many different options, but this is pretty crazy and complex. But when you have so many choices, just trying to find the right combo to create a great sound. And as you can see, each output section has 37 notes. It represents the 37 notes on my controller that does key switching, and the ones that are empty are blank. And that's it. I hope this video has been helpful for you. If for some reason it's not working, something isn't working correctly, then absolutely don't even hesitate. Please feel free to watch the video again. It's very detailed, it's very precise. If you do it exactly as I showed you, it will work for you. But when we are doing something new, it's easy to overlook the obvious. So make sure you're doing it exactly as I said. And if you haven't already, please donate to Brian Wherry for creating such an amazing software, donation-based. He didn't have to do that, but it has increased the quality of composers' workflow, not having to deal with 600 MIDI tracks. It's a very easy, flexible, stable platform, and a lot of time, consideration, and energy went into that. A little of something is better than a lot of nothing, so even $1 makes a big difference. Peace.